get some of these old mills back in play on housing and light manufacturing and retail. And he understands this area. He's here to talk to you. And I also I didn't see Jim sneak in. You might have a career as a farmer after you retire from DC because you blended perfectly. So thank you for being here, Congressman. But, you know, one of the things I love about Steve Grossman is on his mantra for governor is every square mile of this Commonwealth, every town has a chance and deserves to have prosperity. Steve's a businessman. He comes from a generation of businesses. A businessman or person, there's good ones, there's bad ones in every profession. The good business people, which Mr. Grossman is and his family, is a handshake matters, and they deliver on their promise. Okay, and that's something I think we do want in the next governor. When he says something, that he has heard it, and when he says, here's what we're going to go do, you can take that to the bank. So thank you for being here on the Hunt Farm and in the beautiful, friendly town of Orange. Mr. Steve Grossman, our treasurer.
Thank you, Denise. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your support. Jim McGovern, always a pleasure to be with you. You know, Jim McGovern stands for things that are really important, and he learned those not only in his own family, but he learned them from one of the great legislators who's ever served this country and ever served this state, and that's Joe Moakley, whom he worked for many, many years. And I mention that because I apologize to George Hunt Sr. that I was late. We were talking a little bit. He was telling me the story about the family going all the way back to 1879 and how his dad died when he was 8 years old. And I was fascinated by the story, and I said, I apologize for being late. I said, but I needed to be at the State House today with the governor, because the governor, rejecting the advice that he got from other governors around the country who have said, we don't want those kids. Governor of Connecticut, we don't want those kids. Governors of other states, we don't want those kids. 52,000 kids on the Mexican border, ages 3 to 17. No parents, all alone, no place to go. And when the federal government said, we need your help, Governor, would you be willing to make a place available down in Bourne, in the military reservation, to shelter these kids, to feed these kids, to give them a chance to play, to give them a chance to get a little bit of an education while they're here, while they're being dealt with and processed, because according to federal law, and Jim McGovern would bear me out on this, 2008 law, every one of those children needs and deserves a hearing. That's the law. Nobody can be sent anywhere without a hearing. So there'll be decisions made. Some will be reunified with their families because there are families here. Some will be given asylum. Some will be declared refugees. We don't know. We don't even know whether they'll wind up coming here. But the governor agreed on behalf of the people of Massachusetts to take up to 1,000 kids. And nobody knows the issues of human rights, at least in my memory, better than Jim McGovern. Jim McGovern has been a warrior for human rights and human dignity for his entire adult life. Wherever he learned it, whether it was from his family or whether he learned it from Joe Moakley, he stands tall every day in the cause of human rights. There were 4 faith leaders there. I know I'm supposed to talk about agriculture, but since I don't know a lot about agriculture, I figure you'll teach me about agriculture as opposed to my telling you all the things I don't know. There were 4 faith leaders there. There was the cardinal, there was the John Borders, the Reverend John Borders, there was the head of the Islamic Society of Boston, and there was the rabbi from a conservative congregation in Brookline. And each one of them came up and talked about what faith-based communities do to lift up children. There's an old saying, if you want to touch the past, you touch a rock. If you want to touch the present, you touch a flower. If you want to touch the future, you touch the life of a child. We literally have that opportunity to save lives and not send them back into harm's way. There's a wonderful passage from the prophet Isaiah, which I think about in moments like this, when our values are really what we have. Because fundamentally, that's who we are, a commonwealth and a society of values. And I'm sure the sisters would bear me out on this, because those are the teachings that they have learned all through their lives, that they have taught and taught to generations. Isaiah says, if you offer your compassion to the hungry and relieve the oppressed, then shall your light shine in darkness, and your gloom shall be like noonday. It says, the Lord will guide you always. He will slake your thirst in parched places and give strength to your bones. You will be like a watered garden, like a spring whose waters will not fail. And you will be known as the rebuilder of ancient walls, the restorer of dwelling places, the repairer of the breach. We have a breach in our society. We have a Congress, unfortunately, despite the fact that we have leaders like Jim McGovern that won't get together and can't get together. The president asked for $3.7 billion to hire more judges for immigrant courts and more immigrant courts to be created to process these cases. Hundreds of thousands of them aren't being dealt with. And they want to go on vacation in the month of August without dealing with the immigrant crisis. I don't have to tell anybody, you deal with the whole issue of immigrants all the time in the farming industry, in the agriculture industry. There's a whole issue of undocumented immigrants. And I think we all know that undocumented immigrants are a fact of life in our society, in Massachusetts, in every industry, including the agricultural industry. I happen to be a big believer, and this may be controversial, that immigrants should have driver's licenses because, frankly, if you don't have driver's education and you are going to drive and you don't have driver's ed and you don't have a driver's test and you don't have insurance, you're still going to be driving. You got to get to work. You got to take your kids someplace. So let's not kid ourselves. We need to make sure that we don't have mayhem on our roads, so anybody who's an immigrant, undocumented or otherwise, should have a driver's license. I happen to believe that. Some of you may disagree. To those who agree with me or disagree with me, I would quote Ed Koch, the former mayor of New York, who once said, if you agree with me on 8 out of 12 issues, you should vote for me. If you agree with me on 12 out of 12 issues, you should probably see a psychiatrist. In any case, just 2 stories, and then I really want to hear from you. And I'm going to ask you one question, and then I'm going to take my father's advice. My father once said, Steve, you were born with 1 mouth and 2 ears. Try to use them in that proportion. You're a better listener than talker. But a funny story. My friend Warren Shaw is sitting right in front of me here. And Warren and I didn't know each other. I had heard of Warren, because anybody who lives within about 100 miles of the Merrimack Valley and Dracut has heard of Warren Shaw. So I, every year, call into WCAP, which is the radio station in Lowell, and they do an annual Salvation Army telethon. So I call in and I make a contribution, have a little talk, and it's fun and it's light and it's during the Christmas holidays. So Warren's the host of this whole show. And I get on the show, we're talking about whatever, and then somebody says, Steve, what's your favorite ice cream in the Merrimack Valley? So I, not knowing who Warren Shaw was, I said, oh, my favorite ice cream in the Merrimack Valley is JG's over in Methuen. The owner of the radio station calls me up about half hour later. He says, are you nuts? Do you know who you were talking to? This guy is the most powerful political leader in the town of Dracut. He's been a Board of Selectmen member for 24 years. If you want to vote in the town of Dracut, you better make amends to Warren Shaw. So meanwhile, I made the pilgrimage over to Shaw's, had ice cream, we had the conversation, and then we had a meet and greet about 2 or 3 weeks later. I brought everybody over, brought a lot of business over, saw the story of his family on the wall. It's a great story. And we all have stories of families, because the family farms that are represented here under this tent tell a story of the history of Massachusetts and Massachusetts agriculture. I'm very proud of the fact that farms are growing in Massachusetts. We're seeing more farms, not less. I'm proud of the fact that I think we may have the highest percentage of women-owned farms in Massachusetts of any state in the country. I think it's over 30%. That's a terrific thing. Because I was a small business owner for 35 years. I ran a 104-year-old family business called Mass Envelope Company, or Grossman Marketing Group. My grandfather started it. He was an immigrant, came here in 1900. My father and my uncle ran it for many years. I ran it for 35 years. Now my 2 older boys run it. But family businesses, to me, are what Massachusetts is all about. And the tradition of family businesses, passing down a business from generation to generation, and teaching your kids the values of what businesses are all about, what farming is all about, what agriculture is all about, what working the land is all about. So these values matter to me. My grandfather, the last time I saw him alive, said, Steve, there are only 4 things I ever wanted to do with my life. I said, what were they? He said, I wanted to raise a healthy family. I wanted to educate my children. I wanted to own my own business. And I wanted to give something back to the community. Think about the 3 most important things in life: family, career, and the quality of life in the community in which we all live. So to be out here under this tent on this gorgeous day, to be with all of you, to learn a little something about agriculture, and a little bit about farming, and a little bit about some of the things that you deal with every day. I see all the solar panels, and I read about solar panels. I know the controversy about solar panels on the land versus the roof. I want to learn from you today, walking around, but let me ask one question. As a small business owner, I ask this question because so many of you are small business owners. What are the roadblocks and barriers you face today, July of 2014, and how can we lower or remove those roadblocks? What is it that the governor can do, building on some of the interesting and imaginative things about financing and growth and new businesses that we can do? What are some of the things that we can do beyond what we've already done that would make your businesses more profitable, more successful, more ability to sustain into the next generation? And I'm going to, with that, I'm going to take my father's advice. One mouth, two ears. I'm going to do more listening. So anybody who would like to share with me a little bit about roadblocks and barriers you face here in this wonderful industry of agriculture, broadly spoken, because I know it's not all about dairy. There's all kinds of things that make up the agriculture industry. But I do know that when you have 68, 70,000 people in the industry and it's growing, something good is going on. Something terrific is going on. Something that builds the Commonwealth and builds Massachusetts into the kind of society. We can talk about innovation economy all we want. We can talk about science, technology, engineering, and math. But to me, you build a great community by the way we sustain industries that are part of the heritage of what Massachusetts and what America are all about. Please.
The increased
Please.
value of land in the state of Massachusetts is, I find, is one of the greatest roadblocks. And it's not so much buying the land, it's paying the taxes on it. In order to have enough land to farm, you go broke trying to pay the taxes. And we see all these other programs that are happening with the Chapter 61, there's the APR program. Now they've got a big push for a national forest in our area. There's all kinds of incentives and grants. But there's going to be agriculture in this state. They've got to do something to give the farmers a break. Anybody that's involved in agriculture has got to have some type of tax break or some type of incentive so they can afford to own enough land to farm. And if that isn't addressed, farming will go extinct in this state. There's no way you can pay the taxes on it if you have several hundred acres of land in order to keep farming with the income that you're getting from agriculture.
So this issue, could everybody hear that? The question was about the rising cost of land and the fact that if it continues to go up in cost and the taxes continue to go up, it will make farming, you used the word extinct, which is a pretty dramatic word, but you obviously meant it to make a dramatic statement about how this is going to make farming all but unaffordable to be able to grow crops, make a profit, etc. Let me ask you a question. I've read a lot about solar panels and people who put solar panels both on the ground and also on top of buildings. And I understand that to the extent that some people are doing it for a portion of their land in order to derive some income that will enable them to sustain, I don't suggest that that's the solution. Who has an idea as to what we might do? If I was the governor-elect, and I had just been elected governor, and I was putting a transition team, and I'm with a tent full of farmers who also believed at that point that he made about the rising cost of land and the unaffordability of staying in farming, what are some of the things that you would urge me to do to consider that haven't been done to this point? Tax breaks, tax credits, other things that would enable that problem to be dealt with. Please.
What you can't let happen is National Grid. They're trying to gut this SREC, and they're trying to eliminate some of the robust incentives that Massachusetts has had for solar on the roof as well as ground mounts. I think they're kind of pushing back. They've seen the state achieve like 400 megawatts in a pretty rapid period of time. And National Grid or the utilities nationwide, they don't want to lose that control over the power. So I think we have to be real careful that we don't succumb to this currently something been suggested by, I think, Representative Downing from Pittsfield. ratchet back some of the incentives for solar. Really, that would be a real mistake.
So frankly, I'm opposed to ratcheting back the tax credits and the subsidies for solar. If we are going to realize our 2020 and our 2050 goals, the regional greenhouse gas emissions, we're going to reduce our carbon emissions, then we've got to be even more aggressive at working to sustain and to grow and to develop technologies and to grow sources of power that are zero carbon emissions, of which solar and a wind. I'm also in favor of